Whipped out my True North mug for the occasion.
It's a stylish looking mug there, Andrew.
It is. Who is it on our team that can't lift it? Is it Phil, for whom it was too heavy?
Phil's very delicate hands have trouble with the mug. It's just too big for him.
Noah, you've just been doing like the True North mug curls to get in shape for the show, haven't you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's how I got these massive biceps. I don't know how the screen works or whatever, but I've been getting there. I've been putting in my reps.
All right, William, have you been putting in your reps? I haven't been putting in any reps. I haven't put in a rep since like 1997. So. Okay, yeah, you got lots of reps at the Stampede.
I saw William last weekend. He seemed pretty buff, Like,
I know everyone was at the Stampede but me. Like even people that like report to me were all like, "Oh, I'm at the Stampede this week." I'm like, "Who's running through North?" Anyway, you're all back now, and that's what counts. All right, let's get this started. Hello and welcome to you all to another exciting, at least I hope, edition of Off the Record. It is Friday, July 19th. I'm Andrew Lawton, kicking things off for the final day of the work week. Well, for us anyway. You may not work Monday to Friday, which is absolutely fine. In fact, I sometimes wish I didn't even do that. But the COO is here, so I'll take that up with him after the fact. Joining me once again is William McBeath, True North's COO, and I would say one of our regular Alberta correspondents. By virtue of him living in Alberta, it works out very well. So we get to double dip on operations and content there. And also Noah Jarvis, who you hear from time to time on the Daily Brief, and you can catch up with his stellar work on True North's website as well, keeping up on top of the news and all that. Hope you guys had a good week. We were just talking about this off air. You were both at the Stampede. So are you adequately recovered?
Oh yeah, no, I was
by the silence. Apparently not.
I was waiting for William. He's the true Calgarian, but no, I mean I was out at the Stampede grounds pretty much every day except for the couple of days I went to Banff where I went hiking. So I got all of my exercise out. As I showed my biceps. It's they've been growing. I think the hike really did something for that. But yeah, no, Calgary's great.
How do you hike, sir? I don't know a lot about fitness, but what I do know is that I don't think the biceps are engaged with your legs.
Listen, you'll be surprised how much arm muscle you'll put on when you're hiking with a hiking stick, But no, I really enjoyed Calgary. The people there treated me really well. And I don't know, might have to take Rachel Emmanuel's spot or Rachel Parker, sorry, not to, misname her again. But yeah, might take her spot because I kind of like it out here a lot,
I'm just picturing Noah like arm wrestling a bear in Banff just to get the biceps up to full strength on this. Learning all about this, learning all about the human body from Noah. So thank you for that, William. I don't think your Stampede experience was quite the same.
No, I mean you have to pay extra to arm wrestle with the bear when you check in at Banff National Park, but no, must have got the deluxe package. It was a great Stampede though. We had nearly 1.5 million people come through, an all-time record, beautiful weather. It was a great time to be in Calgary.
That sounds fun. I can't remember if I was saying it last week or if I was just saying it in a meeting or I don't know. It all blends together. But I have never been, and everyone is so shocked about it because I'm the type of person that would have been and should have been there, and I've for whatever reason it just never seems to work out. And I was going to go this year, but I waited too long, and then hotels were going to be $500 a night for some crappy hotel that wasn't even anywhere near the Stampede. So I need to start planning now to be at next year's Stampede, and hopefully that'll work out. But anyway, speaking of travel, the Liberal government has decided to spend millions of dollars to buy a luxury New York City condo that's going to be inhabited by the consul for Canada in New York. This is a condo that is going to be for Tom Clark. Tom Clark is currently the consul in New York. He has been a longtime fixture in Canadian media. Retired from media, got a plum diplomatic gig representing the Canadian government in New York City. $9 million is the price of this condo. And I was just reading a story that you wrote for us, Noah. Well, you wrote it, so why don't you tell us what is in the condo? It actually sounds like it has all of the furnishings one might need and more.
Oh, well, all the furnishings and some. I mean, if you're really into macabre stone floors and a powder room with jewel onyx finishes, then this apartment is right for you. I mean, this is stuff that I've never heard of. I just go to bed on my my double bed, and got like regular marble, like stone floors or whatever. But this is the stuff that all Canadian diplomats really need. It's just I couldn't imagine our consul general sleeping anywhere else other than this $9 million condo. I went on their website, and some of the condos even go up to like $50 million. So he's going to be in some good company. Definitely the type of company that Tom Clark and the Trudeau government is sort of accustomed to being around. That's for sure. But no, I think like during a time when Canadians are just scrimping to get by. I mean, the government of Canada, they're buying this 3,600 square foot apartment when your average apartment in Toronto is like 900 square foot. So really goes to show that they're connected to the common man. That's for sure.
Yeah, 3,600 square feet in New York is just insane. And by the way, let me just say, I absolutely want to see Noah Jarvis, the real estate agent. It's got regular stone floors or whatever, which is going to be great. But that's basically it. And I mean, I think even 900 square feet, to what you said, Noah, in Toronto would be quite spacious at this point. Let me finish off the description. It has a wet bar with Cristallo gold quartzite countertops and backsplash, a bathroom clad in Italian white Venato marble, and more. So quite a leap from the regular stone floors.
It's my favorite marble
of your home on which your double bed is situated here. Now, I had a discussion. I think it was on my show. It might have been on Off the Record. We were talking about the catering menu on government flights, and all of the dishes have these really fancy sounding names, and I had someone who works in catering that kind of complained about that and said, listen, I mean, everyone needs to puff up the language on these sorts of things. So I'm having a little bit of fun with this when it comes to the listing of things that are in this condo. But $9 million, and the Liberals tried to, I know, William, when this got blown up last week, they tried to turn it around and say, well, they wouldn't have had to if Harper hadn't sold the last one they had, which I think doesn't really help them as much as they think it does.
No, I mean, possibly someone in foreign affairs or global affairs or whatever we are calling it now probably should have anticipated that in the middle of an affordable housing crisis in Canada, purchasing a luxury, massive New York condo in something called Billionaires Row, by the way. That's the name of the neighborhood it's in. Why? Because everybody who's buying into these buildings just typically happens to be a billionaire. I think they should have anticipated some outrage on the part of Canadians who think, well, I can't afford my rent, but thank God our consul general to New York won't have to walk on those dreaded regular stone floors like so many of us do, that he can spend his time floating on the finest marbles imported from Italy. It's just an outrageous amount of money. And really, you know what? I've been to New York. I've stayed. There was a great hostel just off Times Square. And I bet we could put Tom Clark up for about $60 a night. And he would still be very close to where all the action is in New York City.
The funny thing is, I love how this story first came about, because Global Affairs Canada wasn't really going to admit this until the New York Post initially reported on it, because they misunderstood how pesky things like constitutional monarchies work, and that the government of Canada doesn't actually own property, it's the Crown. So in this case, it's His Majesty King Charles III that owns property. And the New York Post was just, had some reporter flipping through property, real estate contracts and deeds, and found, oh, wow, King Charles has bought a condo. So they initially reported that. And then Global Affairs Canada basically had to run cover for the king and say, well, no, it was actually His Majesty the King and Right of Canada. It's not, King Charles, personal shag pad in New York. It's actually something for a Canadian diplomat. Now, who is Tom Clark, Canadians might ask? Well, Tom Clark, most recently, as he was exiting media in Canada, decided to take a gig as the moderator for the Conservative Party of Canada's most recent leadership race, one of their debates in Edmonton. And it didn't exactly go well because, well, for starters, he brought sound effects.
You're going to do right off the top, as you know, we gave you, in a sense, a little assignment before you came here. You've been working on this, no doubt, diligently for a couple of days now, but what we asked you to do was to finish this sentence. My vision for Canada is. You will have 45 seconds in which to tell us what your vision is, and but there's a twist, and you know it. You can't mention any other candidate on the stage, and you can't mention any other federal leader. If you do, there's going to be trouble, and here's what you're going to hear.
Yeah, and when the questions started, things didn't exactly get more serious. Take a look.
With Mr. Charest, and Mr. Charest, the very first question I have for you is, what book are you reading now?
What
book are you reading now?
Oh,
Mr. Aitchison, I wanted to ask you and give everybody a chance. There's a question and there's a twist to the answer. I want to know who your political hero is, and you cannot say Winston Churchill. Thank you all very much. That was actually really interesting to hear all that. Dr. Lewis, I'm going to start with you, and then, of course, everybody else gets a chance. I know you're all busy. I know that you've got stuff that you're doing right now, but when you have the opportunity to sit down and listen to some music, what do you listen to?
I would say...
I want to go to a question maybe a little more lighthearted, getting to know you a little bit more, and there are a lot of people who want to know this. It's not just me, trust me. But, Mr. Baber, what was the last thing that you binge-watched on TV? What historical figure from any time, anywhere, would you most like to have dinner with?
Favorite book? What did you binge watch? What movie did you listen to last? Boxers or Briefs? Oh my goodness. This was it. And I recall there being a lot of frustration. And I actually like Tom Clark. He's a very decent guy. And this debate, I saw what he was trying to do there. I don't know if it was him that was to blame or Conservative Party organizers that were behind this. But this is the guy that's now holed up in a $9 million New York condo. William, what say you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Tom Clark necessarily set out with the ambition of being a laughingstock at the debate. I don't think that was what he wanted, but I think what it did was show Canadians that a lot in the legacy media weren't taking the Conservative Party seriously as a potential next government. You know, you are interviewing people who could well be the next prime minister of this country. And unlike the current occupant, who really does favor style over substance, the people up there wanted to talk about policy. They wanted to outline where they stood on really important issues that matter to Canadians: housing, cost of living, our military, our foreign affairs, our place in the world. And instead, Tom Clark's up there trying to go for cheap gags. And I think that really didn't sit well with people who thought they were there to interview and learn about a prime minister. And if you're voting, by the way, for a prime minister based on what music he or she listens to, or what they like to binge watch on television, or what historical figure they'd like to have dinner with, then respectfully, I think you're using the wrong criteria to evaluate who should be leader of our country.
Yeah, it's a weird one because on one hand, I think that learning about the humanity of our politicians is interesting. And I say this as someone who wrote a book about Pierre Poilievre. And I will admit that I looked at his answers in that debate because it provided a side of him that you don't usually get in the standard political lines. But I go back to the old time and place thing. And, if I have a 10-minute interview with someone, I'm going to stick to the really important, pressing things that matter from a policy perspective. If I've got an hour and a half with someone, maybe then you throw in a couple of those lighter questions. When you're in a debate, and this is the pivotal thing that is meant for one purpose alone, which is to provide contrast between these people, it should be contrast on the points that matter. And I'll ask you about that, Noah. Do you think anyone cares in terms of using a debate for that opportunity?
No, I mean, absolutely not. Nobody cares about the favorite book or whatever, but people care about, substantial policy issues. This was in 2022 at a time
especially
where,
conservative members,
inflation,
the ones voting in leadership. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And if you remember in that debate, Clark was also talking about, what is going to be your environmental platform, and what is your stance on X social issues that really matter to NDP and Liberal voters, but less so to conservative voters. I mean, you said it really well. There's a time and place, and you also have to know your audience. This is an audience of people who had to pick through 5 or 6 candidates. not exactly like a huge lineup of candidates, but you still want to know what each of them stands for and to see where you're going to rank them on your ballot. So, the people that were coming there and were probably very disappointed. I was watching at home, and at the time I was very disappointed by Tom Clark's questions because, it's very important. I mean, they didn't get a lot of debates, besides the Canada Strong and Free Network debate. I believe this was the only debate, and it was like the only official debate that the party ran. Besides, I think there was a French language one that nobody watched.
And then they added like a third one afterwards that Poilievre just skipped because he thought it was a waste of time. Yeah.
Exactly. So this was the only, important official Conservative Party debate of the campaign, and they just, wasted a bunch of time talking about, favorite books and your favorite song, whatever. I would have hoped that Leslie Lewis would have answered like, my favorite musicians like Vibes Cartel or whatever, because that would have really threw a curveball into the mix. But
Hang on, I've got to look up. I've got to look up Vibes Cartel. Okay, no, I spelt it wrong. I spelled VIBESCARTEL, and Google knew.
You were never going to get it, Andrew.
Yeah, Vibe. I would have said Vibs. VYBZ Cartel with a K. And you think Leslie Lewis is jamming out to Jamaican
Well,
dance
she's
hall.
Jamaican. And
okay, all right.
So, yeah.
Oh, sometimes he's also called Whirl Boss or Teacha.
The world boss, yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah,
I'm learning all sorts about the world of music. I would have gone with the Italian operatic pop trio Il Volo myself. But anyway, no one has ever called me cool in the history of anything. There is a weird, I just will say, there is a weird fixation this government has on New York. Like Trudeau loves jetting off there. So since we're going through some Canadian political history here, I wanted to play this clip for no other reason than it was fun. This was Pierre Poilievre in the House of Commons when Justin Trudeau was taking a jaunt to New York in the midst of a big public sector strike.
This guy is so out of touch. Here we have 150,000 people on strike, the biggest federal strike in Canadian history. Canadians can't get their services. Meanwhile, their housing costs have doubled and crime is ravaging through our streets. And what is he going to do today? Well, start spreading the news. He's leaving today. He wants to be a part of it. New York, New York. Mr. Speaker.
Remind the honourable members that singing is not allowed. Whether it's good or bad, it's not allowed.
These are small-time blues. They're melting away. I'll make a new start of it in old New York. Mr. Speaker, I can't sing very well, but at least I pay for my hotel rooms. Will he pay for his hotel costs when he goes to New York tonight?
All right. Pierre Poilievre or Vibes Cartel? Who's the better singer?
I'm definitely picking Vibes, but he has a pretty okay voice.
Really? I don't. That was terrible.
No, listen. For a party leader, I think that was pretty up there. If you got Justin Trudeau to sing, everyone is just gonna be like this. I can't stand the guy's voice, which most Canadians can't stand the guy's voice, but. I think it was pretty good. Was that like a Frank Sinatra song? It wasn't that bad.
Yes, the theme from New York, New York. And now I'll ask you, William,
Actually
who's better? Pardon me? Yeah, you did. It's Frank Sinatra. So, it's not I didn't think that was a deep cut exactly, but I'll give it to you because you are a lot younger than... Sean is just dismayed in the chat that I didn't even know for sure it was Frank Sinatra. The exact line from our producer Sean is OMG Noah. All right, now William, Pierre Poilievre or Stephen Harper, who's the better singer?
Well, Stephen Harper by far. I've had the privilege of seeing Mr. Harper perform a couple times, formally and informally. He's done so at some Conservative Party events, at his annual barbecue. He breaks out the piano sometimes and likes to sing, and he's great. And I think I remember how shocked everyone was when he walked onto the stage of the National Arts Centre and performed with his local area band a Beatles hit. Which
and Yo-Yo Ma.
Yeah, and noted cellist Yo-Yo Ma.
I like that you've demoted Yo-Yo Ma to just being some Stephen Harper backup artist in Ottawa.
In fairness, I forgot Yo-Yo Ma was there. I was more excited about the Prime Minister, and I don't believe the cello played a huge role in that particular song. But no, I think Pierre's great. I think he's going to be a great prime minister, but I'll be honest, I think when it comes to singing, Mr. Harper does have the leg up on him.
So I actually have a really funny Stephen Harper music story that I've never told before. So during the 2015 election, I was doing my old radio show at Chorus, which we'll be talking about in a little bit. And Stephen Harper was coming to do an in-studio interview. And I had interviewed Stephen Harper before. He had never come to my radio studio. So I was really, really excited about it. When you have the Prime Minister going to a place, you'll have two things will happen beforehand. You'll have RCMP come and do a sweep and secure it. And then an advance team that will come, which are people that work for Harper, and their job is to basically make your life difficult. Like their job is to make sure that, the temperature is right and there's water where it needs to be and all of that stuff. But anyway, so what happened was they were coming through, and my radio station had this big, giant, great hall, and they had this wall of guitars. Many of them had been like donated by bands and were signed. And I think there were probably like 25, 30 of these guitars on the wall. And one of the people that worked for Stephen Harper said, "Oh, interesting. The Prime Minister will love that. He collects guitars." And the station manager got so panicked that Stephen Harper could pick up any one of those guitars to play it. So for the next 4 hours, he did nothing but sit down and tune every one of these guitars because none of them had ever really been tuned. They were just decorative. And then Stephen Harper comes in, we do the interview, and afterwards he's in the Great Hall and he's taking pictures with staff and whatnot. And I said, "Oh, I hear you, collect guitars. You can, pick any of these up if you'd like." He's like, "Oh, no, I don't play them. I just collect them." And just the face of the guy who had spent his entire morning tuning them just dropped. But it's good to know that they all could have been played. Anyway, I hope that story was delightful because I'd forgotten about it until just now. So we will move on to the big question of our time. Mark Carney, I don't know if he's a singer or not. We'll have to figure it out. The Liberals are actively trying to recruit Mark Carney. Noah, what do you think's going on here?
Well, Justin Trudeau is not really doing well in polls right now, and they had just lost a very crucial by-election in Toronto St. Paul, so that had a lot of Liberal voters and Liberal MPs pretty spooked that they're going to lose their jobs and lose their oh so dear government. But so now some Liberals are looking out for alternatives, and one of them has been Mark Carney. Mark Carney has been trying to put himself in a position to basically win over the leadership once Justin Trudeau goes, whether that's during this current government or after the Conservatives win a new government. However, it seems as if the average Canadian is not exactly familiar with Mark Carney. A new poll from Abacus really showed that only 7% of Canadians are able to recognize a photo of Mark Carney when they're prompted. 93% of Canadians do not know who this guy is. So, usually in politics, we sort of get wrapped up in, this really echo chamber between not all supporters, Liberals and Conservatives. And, we really project that, Mark Carney is this, bigger figure than he really is. But when only 7% of Canadians can name him, the average voter certainly sees this old technocrat and says who's this guy who wants to run the country, and once a lot of Canadians get to know him, which if that'll only happen if he runs in the Liberal leadership, but once Canadians start to get to know him, they'll start to realize that this guy's probably a bit of a a technocrat. He's a bit out of touch. He supports carbon taxes, which is very unpopular, but Canadians have not gotten the chance to know him, and it looks like Trudeau Liberal cabinet ministers are significantly more popular than Carney. Chrystia Freeland is recognizable by over a third of Canadians. Anita Anand is recognizable by about 14% of Canadians. And you also have the worst foreign affairs minister of all time, Melanie Joly, who is also far more recognizable than Carney. So I think Carney has a long way to go if he ever wants to win over the Liberal leadership. And certainly he'll have to beat out a bunch of Trudeau cabinet ministers who are probably equally as ambitious and better situated to claim the top job.
Now, I will say recognizability does not always equal likability, because that same poll said 98% recognized Trudeau, and I don't think that's exactly working out well. So maybe the unknown is better, because if they don't know who you are, they don't know they dislike you. I'll ask you about this, William, because you were involved in politics when Michael Ignatieff came into play. So that would have been, I guess, the end of 2008 or early 2009. And it was not long after the 2008 election. And the thing about that is that there were shades of what we're seeing here with Carney, where you have this elite class that looks at this guy and says, dear leader, come in and save us. But no connection between him and ordinary people. And if anything, the more they heard from him, the more they disliked him. Like I remember there was a story that's told from time to time around my church where someone there who didn't follow politics, knew nothing about politics, overheard a discussion about the election, and the name Michael Ignatieff was there. And she said, "Oh, Michael Ignatieff, isn't that guy that said the only thing he likes about Canada is Algonquin Park?" And we all sort of realized if that message has penetrated through to this person, it's going to be a blowout for the Conservatives, which it was. But are you seeing the same thing, the Carney and Ignatieff, or is it worse now?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a lot of parallels between these two people. It's surprising that the Liberal Party, thinking that, voters think we're out of touch, we don't understand the concerns of everyday working Canadians, we just bought ourselves this $9 million condo in Billionaire Row. I know what will rehabilitate our image: a rich international banking elite who hasn't been in Canada in the better part of a decade and a half.
And who was in the royal box at Wimbledon last week.
And who was eating the strawberries and cream at Wimbledon, yes. So, I don't know if maybe it's so long ago the Liberals forgot exactly how well it went for Mr. Ignatieff, who did end up leading the party to its worst ever showing since Canada was a country. We wouldn't necessarily call that a great success. And I think if they do decide to try and shuffle in Mr. Carney, first of all, I don't think Mr. Carney is a dumb man, and I would be surprised if offered the captainship of the Titanic, if he would gladly embrace that job, saying, of course I want to lead my party into a historic defeat in the next election. But if he does decide to take on this task, I think he's going to have a lot of trouble connecting with everyday Canadians who, frankly, are tired of a lot of people, elites, bankers, and globetrotters who travel frequently on taxpayer dollars are three of the people they're most sick of, and Mr. Carney happens to embody all three of them.
Yeah, no, very well said. There is a huge unpopularity problem right now for the Liberals. Now, I've remarked, and I said this on my show yesterday, that the Liberals want to look everywhere but in the mirror. They want to find all of these things they can blame, these people they can blame. Trudeau has been leaking that Chrystia Freeland's the problem, basically. But the anger is in some cases deserved. Now, I'm a firm objector of political violence. I don't support people harassing politicians. I think peaceful protest is legitimate. I think that you should do it at their offices and not at their homes. But I don't like this idea. Marco Mendicino, who used to be a cabinet minister, now he's just a backbench Liberal MP, came out with that we should have protective zones around MP offices. So we should have a cordoned off area of 50 to 100 meters. And inside I don't know if he wants it to be illegal to protest, or he says it's to protect MPs and their staff against harassment. And if you violate that, you could even, he said, go to jail. So if you aren't allowed to protest your members of parliament at their offices, people that work for you at the places that they work, then where are you allowed to protest? How are you supposed to do this? And again, I'm not saying I'm justifying MP harassment, but I see how something like this would basically be used as an excuse for MPs that don't want to have to deal with people who are unhappy with them.
Yeah, it's a really great mechanism to dodge accountability if you're an MP. Now, I sort of get the sentiment because, I think it was just today or yesterday where a Trudeau cabinet minister had his office vandalized by more than likely pro-Hamas people. And this has been something that has been happening routinely throughout the country where, pro-Hamas people will come and, paint big triangles or like a watermelon or smash windows or do whatever they do to sort of, show that they are an annoying presence in Canadian politics and that they should be further discredited. But I feel that when you have MPs who are very unpopular, you have a party that's very unpopular, they're going to look for new and inventive ways to dodge accountability, and this is one of them. They don't want to have people coming up to their constituency offices telling them how bad of a job that they're doing or how the carbon tax is really affecting their lives. Perhaps they get that message at the doorsteps and through emails and stuff like that, but a lot of people don't get a chance to interact with an MP in person. And I feel that once MPs, are sort of shielding themselves off from the general public, it creates, a bigger gap between, the individual constituent and the MP, and you sort of exacerbate some of the problems that people are feeling in politics. That politicians are increasingly disconnected from the people, and they don't want anything to do with the common citizen who may have some angry opinions, sure, but they're a Canadian just like any other Canadian.
William?
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, it's already illegal to deface a building. There doesn't need to be a whole new law in order to say this thing that was already illegal is super duper illegal, or whatever the plan is. And, I think what we don't want are people protesting at politicians' houses. We don't want them showing up when a politician is trying to eat dinner with his family and causing a huge scene inside a restaurant. Things like that. But I think it's perfectly legitimate to protest outside of an MP's office. And as Noah says, our MPs are becoming increasingly cloistered, particularly, I think, because they're just so unpopular, some of them, and they want to avoid it. In England, if you show up to Parliament and Parliament's sitting and your MP is in his office, if you go into the ground floor and demand to see your MP, by law, your MP has to come down and meet with you for a period of time. Yeah, absolutely.
I did not know that.
And so, the idea that we are a democracy, elected officials are accountable to their voters, isn't some abstract in a lot of other parts of the world. In England, certainly, they say you have an absolute right to talk to your elected official and to share your views and concerns. And I think in Canada, if the Liberals are so concerned that MPs are so unpopular that they need this new bubble of protection around them, then maybe it is time to have a good hard look in the mirror and say, well, why are our MPs now so unpopular? Is it because we're part of an out-of-touch, unpopular government that, frankly, should have been put out of its misery years ago, let alone waiting all the way till next year?
Yeah, that's quite interesting. I actually like that little bit of UK trivia. I know UK MPs also host, generally, they're called surgeries. And it confused me the first time I heard it, because I saw some MPs say, I'll be doing surgery in my riding. And I was like, that's, an interesting promotional tool. But they're literally meetings where they sit down in one room for a whole day, basically, and anyone that wants to see them for a constituency matter, for anything, can come and sit down with them. So there is an accessibility there that you certainly don't get in the US, and in Canada, I'd argue, increasingly you don't as well. So that was very good. I like learning things. So thank you for that, William. I hope it's true, because I will repeat it to people. And if it's not, I will have only you and then myself to blame.
It was told to me, I should say, it was told to me when I was touring the House of Commons by a House of Commons tour guide in the United Kingdom. So
what year?
Well, this would have been in 2010.
Okay, all right.
Anyway,
so that's a useful caveat. So
yeah,
okay.
Just want to say that's where I learned it from.
So unless like Boris Johnson changed it or something, this is still the standard that we're going with. All right. Well, let's turn our attention south of the border, which we historically didn't do on True North all that often, but it's off the record. We get to throw the rules out the window. And I think last weekend, the calculation changed a little bit when the former president, and likely the next president, survives an assassination attempt. I think this pushes it outside of national borders. But it's been a busy, busy week. We have the Republican convention, which just wrapped up. Donald Trump spoke last night. But we also had earlier this week him unveiling his running mate, J.D. Vance, who's had a fair bit to say about Canada, which we'll get to in a moment. But let me just first point out a couple of the clips that I would say are pretty unhinged that came out of Donald Trump quite literally taking a bullet. It was in his ear, but it could have quite easily gone through his head had he not turned at the last moment. And Jen Psaki, the former White House press secretary, says, well, the ones that are really under threat right now are journalists.
It feels all paused right now. One thing for Elvis to remember is it may not feel paused tomorrow or Tuesday. And part of that is because the convention is starting. And unless the programming changes, the rhetoric and how the programming is set up is not actually calming the tone or restoring civility. We'll see if that programming changes, but if it stays the same, that is escalating it. It is not a civil approach to a convention.
Yeah, and then you have to talk about the real victim of the week, though. I mean, yes, Donald Trump was shot, but Joe Biden got COVID.
Here's the question that I have on that. These two men are both elderly. Donald Trump is an elderly man who, for whatever reason, was given 9 seconds to take a iconic photo op during an active shooter situation. Weird situation. We'll figure that out one day. But his survival of that and bouncing right back and going right to his convention is being conveyed in the media world as a sign of strength. This current president of the United States is 81 years old and has COVID. Should he be fine in a couple of days? Doesn't that convey exactly the same thing? That he's strong enough, older than Trump, to have gotten something that used to really be fatal to people his age. So if he does fine out of it and comes back and is able to do rallies, isn't that exactly the same? I mean, it's not exactly the same. It's not the same incident, but it's an elderly man coming through out of an illness.
It should.
I like Jen Psaki's little look at Joy Reid. She's like, "What are you talking about, woman?"
Yeah. Even when you've lost Jen Psaki, even you realize you've jumped the shark on this. Now, I've had COVID maybe 2 or 3 times. I've never been shot. So the idea that these two are in some way equivalent, I find it hilarious. But does this not say, Noah, just how much they've lowered the bar for Joe Biden? That like Joe Biden getting over a cold is now like, oh wow, good for you, little buddy. It's like a toddler that takes a second step. Is that basically where we're at?
You know, every time I call in sick and I come back, you guys have to applaud me for not dying. But you know,
good for you, little buddy.
Oh, you got over the cold, nice. But you know, this lowering the standards, completely for Biden. But I don't think like anyone takes this seriously. I think this is like very partisan Democrats. I think the partisanship in the United States is like a lot more extreme than in Canada. You have some like very partisan Democrats on MSNBC trying their best, to cope through, what is probably a very bad, few past months, and it's going to be a really bad future for the Democrats in the next 4+ years, because it looks like Trump's going to win, and you have to like frame all of Biden's accomplishments, or I wouldn't say catching COVID is an accomplishment. I'd say catching COVID is just a circumstance that happened to him. So all the circumstances and minor accomplishments that Biden makes, has to be amplified to be the greatest thing of all time. But I haven't ever experienced getting a bullet, like 1 inch from my brain. That didn't ever happen to me. But I've gotten a few colds in my lifetime, and I think I've gotten over pretty much all of them without dying, unless there's one I recall that I just don't recall. So, I think when the Democrats they cope really hard, and it's at the expense of this old guy who is just like trying his best to stay alive, and he's not really doing a great job at that.
Now, Vibes Cartel, I saw earlier, has an album called Rifle Shot. I don't know what relevance that has. It just seems fun to point out. We call that a callback. I haven't heard the album. I don't know what it's about. Just a rifle shot seems like a shot from a rifle, unless we're going, deep metaphor. William, lowering the expectations, is that what's happening here? Or do these people genuinely believe it?
Yeah, no, I mean, I want to talk about this extremism rhetoric language that they've been using. Now, look, I think both sides of the political divide are guilty of using inflammatory rhetoric. I think, for the Republicans to suddenly, put their hand on their heart and say, we're shocked to discover that people have been saying outrageous things on our side. But if you look at extremism and the media only, and I would say almost exclusively, report on extremism on the right. They talk about white supremacy. They talk about hate groups on the right. They talk about extremist language on the right. They ignore all of the same and equally vitriolic statements and extremism on the left. They have completely ignored that. And I think a lot of those of us who are conservative have been trying to point out that double standard, that there are people on the left who espouse equally or even more vile statements than those on the right, and have called routinely for death and destruction of their political opponents. They've used language calling them evil. And, the media have been completely complicit in not covering it and focusing only exclusively on conservatives. So when you see people like Danielle Smith or others who have said it's time for the left to lower the temperature, I think one of the reasons why media are reacting with such shock is because they're just unwilling to admit that there's a problem on the left, just as much, if not more so, than on the right when it comes to this extremist rhetoric.
Yeah, I think you're quite right about that. And also, there's the double standard is always going to be there. And the left just loves to, and I said this in an interview yesterday, the left will treat its radicals as non-existent. The right will disavow and reject its radicals. And I think whenever someone from the left commits an act of political violence in some way, the left will try to, basically downplay it, ignore it. When someone from the right does, the left will try to extrapolate it and say they're representative of the right as a whole. And I think it's why the right has become a lot more scrappy. And we've seen it in Canada to some extent. Pierre Poilievre flipping the script on the media. Certainly you've seen it in the US. It's a big part of Donald Trump's appeal to Republican voters and independent voters. And it's a big part of what J.D. Vance, his new running mate, and for a Canadian tie-in, also the former university best bud of Jamil Javani, who's now a Conservative MP. So imagine if, Jamil Javani is like the deputy prime minister and J.D. Vance is Yale Law School chum is the vice president. Think of the powerhouse that'll be. But J.D. Vance has also had Canada on his radar in the past. A couple of tweets I wanted to share with you on this. This one is him responding to, it was sharing an Ottawa police tweet about the takedown of the Freedom Convoy. He says, what's happening in Canada is a far greater assault on democracy than anything the left has whined about the last few years. It could happen here if we don't elect people who defend our voters. He also weighed in on the freezing of bank accounts by Chrystia Freeland. This is why crypto is taking off. The regime will cut off your access to banking if you have the wrong politics. And he also took aim at church burning in Canada at a time when no one else was. And he says, what the hell is happening in Canada? Very good question. We'll keep an eye out on that. I don't know if he's not elected to be a pundit on Canadian affairs, but it's good to know that he's aware of these issues and aware of what Canadians have been dealing with. I'm not sure if he'll do the old Tucker Carlson thing and advocate that the United States comes in to liberate Canada or invade us or anything like that, but time will tell, I guess. Just in closing here, I mentioned this earlier. I used to work for Chorus. Chorus has seen better days, has it not, William?
Yes. If you are walking down the street of a major Canadian city and you see someone on the street corner begging for change, they might be someone dealing with homeless, or they might be a Chorus shareholder attempting to offload their shares before they collapse even further in price. Because I think as of today, the headline you're looking at says all-time low of 12 cents. Well, in fact, Chorus actually ended up closing at 9 cents today, so below a dime per share, which is simply catastrophic and completely unexpected, I would say, given the overall collapse of Canada's legacy media market.
Can you, Sean, put up the stock chart of Chorus? So this is the all-time stock chart. Now, I'd like it noted that when they fired me, they were in free fall not long after, because that was 2018. So I think 2018, I'm actually going to choose to believe that peak there you see between 2015 and 2019, that was the day before I got canned, and then it's all been downhill after that. That's what I'm choosing to believe. When Chorus got rid of me, it was all over. But 9 cents, is there a future for the legacy media, Noah?
Oh no, absolutely not. I mean, Chorus, they're supposed to be a staple of Canadian media. They own Global, and they own when I was a kid, I really liked Teletoon. It seems like that's gonna go by the wayside. But it just goes to show that if you're a company that is trying to stay relevant in the Canadian media landscape or the media landscape in any country, you have to innovate, you have to evolve, you have to perhaps cut some waste and cut some staff that is unnecessary. And True North, we operate a very nimble operation, and of course is the exact opposite of a nimble operation. They're a dying operation with way too many people. They're bleeding money, and it's not a great thing that we should be celebrating that Chorus is dying, but it seems like the Canadian consumer has been voting with their dollar by not giving Chorus any more of their money than they feel like they need to, except for in their cable packages, which less and less Canadians are buying cable. So rest in peace to Chorus. Hope they enjoy their long dirt nap, and let's hope that something new can arrive from the ashes.
Yeah. YTV, Sean noted, was also a Chorus show. And a little fun fact, I was a contestant on Video and Arcade Top 10 which was like an old vintage 90s and early 2000s YTV game show. It was my foray into media. I did not win, but I got to play a game on an N64 that hadn't come out, and I had never really played N64 before, so that was my excuse. Anyway,
I was going to say,
you're shaking your head, William.
No, it doesn't surprise me at all. I think, I was just thinking about you, and the fact is that Chorus, systematically eliminated every one of its conservative media personalities.
Yeah.
And is it now any surprise that nobody is watching or listening to them anymore when they drove what, in my opinion, is a majority of the representatives of people, because I believe conservatives are the majority in this country, silent though they may be sometimes. They said, no, we don't want any of you on any of our programmings. Get out. And that was basically the message to their loyal listeners and to their advertisers. We're not interested in your money. We're not interested in your loyalty. We want to candor to the woke mob just like everybody else.
Yeah, and you're right about that, because talk radio is one of the epitomes of go woke, go broke, because it's the one form of media that has a really, really heavy conservative dominance in terms of its audience share, especially in the US, but even in Canada. So when Canadian talk radio companies started to do a conservative purge, which they did, and I was a part of it, but there were other casualties as well, they did not recapture anything. All they did is just start serving up pablum, and everyone said, okay, well, screw that. I'll just go and listen to my podcast on True North. I'll listen to whatever Rebel News and Western Standard are doing, and that was, I think, the great victory for independent media, is that talk radio. I mean, yes, we can talk about newspapers in decline, but podcasts have replaced talk radio because you get to listen to better content, and hey, you don't get the ads. So anyway, that does it for us for today. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks to William McBeath and Noah Jarvis for hitting up this show and doing your contributions. And Noah will prescribe you some Frank Sinatra, and I'll do some Vibes Cartel, and we'll reconvene on our company meeting on Monday. But that's it, everyone. And remember, everything you've heard was off the record. See, now I want to know if Leslyn Lewis listens to Vibes Cartel. You've made me wonder.
The first song you have to check out is Summertime. It's, the perfect time to, listen to it. It's a bang. You probably heard of it like on the radio or something like that. He's actually kind of
Did you not just hear the last segment? I don't listen to the radio.
Ah, damn it.
What's a radio, Noah?
Yeah.
Oh, is this a big box thing? Oh, I don't know what it is, but no, like, I promise you too, William. You got to listen to some Vibes Cartel. And the next time I come to Stampede, I better be hearing that on the loudspeaker. Just on repeat.
Yep. After the Shania Twain, they'll put on Vibes Cartel. That's how it'll go.
I'm sure.
All right, I'll listen to some. That I will give you. No, I will give you. There's an editing backlog that's like a mile long. But I will give you, after we get off this air, the 2 minutes and 47 seconds of listening to Summertime. So
it's more important than our work.